It's a slightly last-minute thrown together panel. We're going to be talking about current trends in modern gaming. This was my ill-conceived idea, so if it goes horribly, horribly wrong, you know who to blame. Though I'm not responsible for what either of these reprobates say. So, yes.
Yeah, I sort of feel like these guys are the ones who are qualified and know what
I
they're talking
know.
about. We've
It's
got like an opinion.
there's the amateur end, and then there's the professional end. So you're probably going to want to listen to those guys instead of us.
Well, you're at least a journalist, and I was a journalist. I was a journalist once for a bit, so.
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time.
You have to speak into the microphone as well, Chris.
I'm
Do you
quite-
remember those things you work with all day?
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh dear. N.
Introduce the panel.
It's good stuff.
You do that, Chris. You're good at that.
Don't you know who I am? No, okay, so just starting in here, we have Mr. John Stabler, known for obviously Lave Radio, something of a, I suppose, a keen hobbyist game developer yourself.
Correct, yeah.
There are a number of different projects that we've helped you test, and you were very clear that there was going to be no Wire Wars at Lavecon this
Yeah,
week.
well, I said ahead of time that I was really. I got the posters printed. I was going to have USB sticks for everyone to take away for alpha access, things like that. But I moved house, and the new house had a very terrible internet connection. It's like not even half a meg. So I basically cut my server testing short. I couldn't get anyone connecting because the latency was so high. So I basically had to can the idea. So until I get Infinity installed next month, I can't complete my testing. So that'll maybe Christmas time, I'll get something out. But
I would say that Wire Wars is really good.
yeah,
it's good
You'll
fun.
have to take his word for it. He
Yeah.
has played it. So and it is. Would you say it's a unique idea? Something that you haven't seen
It
before?
is. You know, first time I played it, I absolutely hated it. No, I didn't absolutely hate it, but I didn't understand, because you have it's sort of a real-time strategy game where each of you is a unit. I mean, it's like a big multiplayer game, but you have these circuits that you build on the map, and the circuits distribute power, and every unit that you build has to be powered by the circuit. What I didn't understand was that it has the power has a frequency. So the way the power moves along the blocks, you have to kind of learn how to program. And once you know how to do it, you can build these incredible defensive structures. But if you have no idea, I was just like, why none of, I've built 15 guns and none of them fire on the enemy. And it was,
Yeah.
but it's good. Look forward to it, guys. It'll be good. We also have Lisa Trott, or Lisa Vu, depending on how you look at it.
Yep.
Has her own website, Vu's Review, currently works for a games company doing their
Community management.
community management.
Yep.
Anything else I missed?
No. Well, I do Lave Radio occasionally.
Yeah, sorry. So I thought I'd done that.
Yeah, no, do that.
I'm Chris Jarvis from Lave Radio, and I produce audio dramas and audio books, and I have previously, I suppose, been a bit of a hobbyist game developer, and worked as a game journalist for a short period of time. And I'm also Lave Radio. We also have with us Julian Gollop, who is a professional game developer, designer,
Hello.
has his own studio.
Very kindly let us rope him in at last minute.
Yeah. So if in doubt, Julian is the one that actually knows what he's talking about on this panel. Julian currently has his game Chaos Reborn in. Is it still early access, or is it
It is still in early access.
early
yes.
access? But it's very feature complete. I don't know how many people have been either playing it this weekend or have played it already.
If you have Steam, go give it a look. It's well
Yeah,
worth
it's
it.
running down in the tournament room. There's a spectator screen you can see. It's a very different kind of turn-based combat game. Again, similar to Wire Wars. There, the concepts that you have to sort of get your head around. First time I played it, I didn't understand why there were no hit points. There are no hit points. You either die or you don't, and there is a percentage chance to hit, and it makes for a very different kind of competitive experience. I thoroughly recommend it. We also have Darren Gray, who is probably somewhere between a professional game developer and a hobbyist game. You're slightly more than a hobbyist game developer,
Yeah,
but you're not a full-time.
I've contributed to a larger commercial project and have released sort of polished products, but everything I do is.
Get closer to the microphone so people can hear you. Sorry.
Hello. So I do a lot of hobbyist work. I release a lot of free open source games, but they're generally considered pretty polished and pretty high standard in the hobbyist community. And I've also contributed to a number of commercial projects, especially being sort of consultant on a number of large roguelike projects.
Yes. So that's the panel. So do we want to kick off with questions?
We can do.
Okay, does anyone have any questions?
Shall,
Shall I grab the roving? Oh, you're going to do it. Okay.
I'm short enough to go onto the speaker.
But I suppose we might need an initial sort of prompted question to start off. So talk about trends in modern gaming. I think that, I mean, it's fair to say that the gaming kind of landscape is very different now than it was, say, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, there was I would say there was a situation where, I mean, again, it's just my perspective, other people probably disagree with me, but 10 years ago, I personally wouldn't have considered the PC to be a particularly viable platform for interesting or exciting game development. I would have said that the mass consoles were kind of the place where all the interesting stuff was happening, and I think now, because of the success of things like such a broad digital distribution platform like Steam, actually suddenly the PC is sort of the place where all the interesting and experimental and varied stuff is going on, and actually the consoles have become very conservative. That's my view to kick things on. What do we think?
I'd agree. I think the rise of the indie developer and publisher and things like you said, like Steam and good old games as distribution platforms, and sort of the journey towards the removal of DRM and things like that is really pushing PC forward again into sort of the forefront of gaming. You're getting a lot of really amazing indie games that start off on the PC, get big, and then all of a sudden console like Xbox and Sony go, oh, we'd quite like you to do a console port for that. Please, thank you. When people have been playing it probably for a year and a half already on PC, and then all of a sudden Sony goes, yeah, we have all these great indie titles, and everybody's like, yeah, I've had it in my Steam library for 6 months or so. So
are you thinking of something like maybe something like Retro City Rampage, which is sort of
there's a whole bunch of them. There's
just as an example.
Yeah. Oh God, what is there that recently-
Octodad, Hotline Miami.
Yeah. All the Devolver Digital stuff, which is
Limbo,
fantastic.
Spelunky, Minecraft even. Minecraft was huge, and then Microsoft came along and thought, oh, we're quite interested in this, and now it's on Xbox.
Many billions of dollars interested.
Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah, I can't believe what they paid for that. But anyway.
Are they what, $8 billion?
Something, I can't imagine how you pay $8 billion for something and still make a profit.
Notch is a very rich man.
But also in terms of the I suppose the trends in gaming, one of the other things, and this is particularly interesting with Julian being here, is that there was, I suppose, a trend as we got into the sort of the noughties, if you like, that game development teams were perceived, because of the kinds of games that were being developed and the difficulties of the consoles on which they were being developed, game teams just seem to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and budgets seem to get. So what's the sort of size of your team that you've got working on Chaos in Sophia?
Yeah, so in Sophia, there's 8 of us working full-time on the game, but we do work with outsourcing as well, so we've actually worked with a number of other people. But it's a much more flexible kind of game development compared to a big studio with overheads and HR people and accountants and producers and associate producers and QA people. We don't have any of those, actually, absolutely none of them. And we've built up a good roster of reliable, good quality freelance independent artists, effects artists, musicians, and suddenly it feels like you have a lot of flexibility in what you're doing. You can make very good progress, and you don't have these huge overheads that a big publisher has. Now, I've worked for Ubisoft for nearly 6 years, so I've worked in a situation where I've worked for a big publisher and I've worked as an indie, and the contrast is very, very interesting. And Ubisoft, just one example, in Assassin's Creed, they have multiple studios working on it, and we're talking about teams of hundreds of people. Assassin's Creed Black Flag probably had about maybe 800 people working on it for over a year in at least 3 or 4 different studios. It's enormously expensive, and it's very inefficient as well, because to actually try and manage and organize such a large team, you have all these people that are trying to manage and organize it, and yeah, I mean, to Ubisoft credit, they kind of pull it off. They create a game which has a huge amount of content. There's a huge amount of art and animation in it, but as we've already mentioned, there's a big risk aversion. The big publishers drive their business model based on these big existing franchises, and there's not much innovation in terms of the basic mechanics of these games. And investing in a new IP is very risky. So for Ubisoft, for example, they released Watch Dogs, a very expensive development. It didn't work so well for them. It did financially, critically not so much. But it's just an enormous expense, and there's a big void, there's a big gap from these AAA titles. Suddenly there's this big void that's opened up, and it's the indie games developers have kind of filled in this gap a bit, but the other main trend in modern gaming, which we're kind of all aware of, but maybe we don't take it so seriously, is the rise of the App Store. Because one of the things that Apple did was that they created a technology based on a distribution platform, and in a way Steam is the same. So Steam is probably mostly responsible for restoring the PC as a truly viable games platform for actually not just indie developers but also big publishers. Everybody's using Steam, and in terms of like the App Store and also the Google Play Store, everybody's now got access to a large market distribution network, and these two things have fundamentally changed the landscape of gaming, and it's kind of
It's no longer boxes on shelves, isn't it?
No, it's no longer boxes and shelves at all. And the huge diversity of content and themes in games now is staggering. It's just been like an explosion.
So is there? Do you think that not only the availability of a platform for smaller teams, but also the kind of, because we're talking about trends in gaming, one of the things I've noticed recently is that the number of games that are produced with a pixel art style, i.e., a very low resolution but very high detailed graphical art style. Do you think the current sort of support for indies, is it sufficient to enable solo game developers, do you think, to produce ideas and get them kind of completed, or do you still think there is a need for a sort of a minimum team size that is more than one, if you like? Is it sort of return of the bedroom coder, or are we not? Yeah. Is that not quite feasible?
No, it exists. I know people who are making. I know one-man teams who are making and releasing games on the App Store and for Google Play, and even for PCs. So it's possible.
We've got one right here.
Yeah, it's done.
Yeah, I'm held up by the net code.
You're working. You're not doing the graphics, though, are you? I mean, you're.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of relying on people I know who can hold a pen, whereas I can't do that. But yeah, I got people helping me, but I think that most of it is graphics I've begged, stolen, borrowed, or whatever for now, until I can get something done properly. And for me, it's all about making a prototype and getting it ready. Because at the end of the day, if somebody can't see that if your prototype's not fun, I can't see how putting a layer of gloss on it is going to help.
Something I've seen a lot of lately is solo devs that just contract out the artwork and the music and things like that. So they put out a bid and they get people to do in, but 90% of the work, the actual game mechanics and so on, the UI and all this kind of important stuff, is one dev. Mm-hmm. And then everything else is other people. But then I do know some solo people. Derek Yu, who made Spelunky, is entirely on his own in Game Maker. I think that's another thing that's worth bringing up, is that the accessibility of getting into making games has changed drastically. We used to have the bedroom coder, but it was, extremists that were really good with code, and were able to work on these low-level languages and produce interesting content. These days we have Unity. we have Game Maker, we have a whole other bunch of engines that lets anyone get in and make a game. And it means there's a lot of rubbish out there from people that are producing terrible games, but it opens the field to have so many more games and so many more inventive games that aren't just following the herd.
Yeah, I definitely say that the tools that are available for people out there and the price points at which they're available have drastically changed in the last few years. And like you said, with things like Unity, I think Valve's own proprietary one, Source, has opened up a lot of doors for sort of either very small team numbers or solo developers. Mobile as well, like you were saying, like Google Play and the App Store allows a lot of flexibility in the way in which somebody can spend time developing. There's some fantastic games. It's not just pixel art. There's a game called Maya, which was partially kickstarted. A lovely guy called Simon works on it. He's basically put every penny of his own money into it. Like his whole life savings went into that game as well as the Kickstarter money. So he's just as invested in the technology and the development as like the people who sort of thought that his project was worthy, and he's still working on it now. I think it was supposed to be released maybe a year ago, bless him, but he's rewritten the game engine 3 times. But he's so dedicated, but he has that passion and that sort of ability and more resources to pull from now than I think any original bedroom coders ever did, and that's why we see such really great stuff coming out of small or one-man teams, or like things like Thomas Was Alone is another fantastic example of one guy, Mike Bithell, making something incredible and like simple but really like it grabbed everybody's attention. So I think it's that's definitely going to be a big thing. It's already a big thing, but it's going to be a big thing in the next few years as tools to do that sort of thing become more and more accessible. The price point comes further and further down, and
Sorry, just to clarify on that then. So you were sort of talking earlier about how, in terms of innovation what's sometimes lacking is innovation in game mechanics. There's sort of two parts to this question. I mean, do you ever look back at games, I mean this is for the whole panel, just for Julian, do you ever look back at games in the sort of between, I guess, say like 1980 to 1985, when things were very kind of, there was no back catalogue of games to compare to. Do you ever look back at that and think that there's game styles and genres that kind of appeared during that era, and then maybe after a while it homogenized, but there are actually some kind of, do you ever find any sort of fledgling ideas there that that sort of got left behind? And the other thing I was going to say, if you're talking about using things like Unity, does using a tool which has sort of been built almost to help people create the kinds of games that already exist, does that stifle innovation, or does Unity allow enough flexibility that you can do literally anything, even something that they might not have necessarily thought of? Sort of two-part question, really.
So, I mean, are you saying that during the 1980s there may have been trends that developed that got left behind and never...
It's the other way around. I suppose I was thinking that when people didn't have a back catalogue of games to compare to, they would sit down and create something very fresh. But after a while, what games developed into was sort of platform games, driving games, space games, and that maybe some of those early, very rough attempts to make something that kind of worked as a game on a computer, that maybe there are sort of dead ends that never got developed, if you like.
Well, the dead ends that never got developed.
I would say that actually there's a huge amount of this, and there's certain sort of game archivists that have done a lot of work to try and bring those back and make them playable. There's a lot of really experimental stuff, especially in the shareware days, that only got passed around a few hundred people maybe, and was really fantastic, interesting stuff. There's a lot of interesting, weird text adventures with innovative mechanics and things that go beyond what modern games do. And actually, a big nice thing recently is a lot of these things are being re-released on Steam. They're getting through Greenlight, on Kickstarter, through some sort of remake process, or on mobile. Has anyone here played King of Dragon's Pass? No? Okay, lots of blank plays. Yeah?
Yes.
So you're aware of it. It's one of these games that very few people were aware of when it's released. It's been re-released now. It's been phenomenally successful.
Very
upon its
interesting game.
re-release.
Yeah.
And very unique game, very innovative game, very interesting. It's got kind of a randomized story with all sorts of strange quests and things attached to it. And there's a lot in our past, in our early sort of building blocks of the past that I think has been lost, and we could do with trying to restore more of that.
Yeah, well, to be honest, some of those games didn't work very well. I remember a game called The Rats. It was a Spectrum game based on James Herbert's horror novel, The Rats. And it was a combination of a strategy game and a text adventure game. So you had like a strategic view of London, and you saw the progression of infestations of rats, and you had to manage resources to keep the little vermin down. But then when you visited certain areas, it would generate a little text adventure thing with a little miniature story which you had to get through to go on to the next stage of the game. And I thought that was very innovative when I tried it. The only problem is that you had to actually load from the Spectrum cassette tape. Each of these little mini adventures had to be loaded separately. So you had to press play on the Spectrum tape. When it finished loading, you had to stop it and play that text adventure, then do some strategy stuff. And the problem I found was I got to one point in the tape where it stopped loading properly. I couldn't go any further. But there were some very interesting experiments done like that. I mean, but from my point of view, the things which really influenced me were, in terms of innovation, were maybe the stuff that, for example, Rare did Night Law, which was the first time that I saw a 3D isometric perspective game made on a Spectrum, which was, I thought, technically was amazing. And the other major influence on me, which again hasn't really been attempted in the same way, is probably Lords of Midnight by Mike Singleton. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that one, but I kind of compare it to Elite in the way that it created this vast sort of environment to explore and move around in this first-person view of the terrain, and you had lots of characters involved in this epic struggle, which kind of a Lord of the Rings style thing, that you had a personal quest as well as an army quest, and the scale of ambition of that game is amazing. But again, as you said, that has been re-released, and shortly before. Actually, no, shortly after Mike Singleton died, which was quite recently, a couple of years ago, I think, the guy that was working on this re-release made the Lords of Midnight available for iPad. I've got it on the iPad now, so you can go back and play it. An improved version of the original game. And it's very weird to see that kind of thing resurfacing. But these kind of things really stood out to me as being absolute landmarks. Elite is one of them, of course, and the fact that people still remember those games and want something like those again has allowed, me to keep producing games, I guess, and it's which is really amazing.
Yeah, I have a friend that the game he most wants to come back is Sentinel.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a really innovative game. Yes.
I think it's quite interesting, the fact that if we look at how stuff started off, it was all text adventure for the most part, and now we're seeing a real resurgence in sort of like interactive fiction, very text adventure-y games again, and people love them. Things like Kentucky Route Zero, which is a fantastic game, and it's a point and click text adventure, but people go mad for it because it's fantastic and it's got sort of a slightly Twin Peaksy vibe to it, and we're seeing more and more stuff like that become popular with people who never played stuff on Spectrum or Commodore, and it's weird how it's sort of come full circle almost, where we want that sort of simpler interaction, but sort of richer content, I guess.
Yes. This is a trend, yes.
Yeah. That's.
It's almost. I was thinking it's almost a shame that something like the Kindle, the ebook format, it's almost a shame that it doesn't have a sort of standardised programmatic layout.
Read your own adventure book on your Kindle.
Exactly. I mean, there's been a number of times I've looked at the
I'd
Kindle.
probably buy that.
Yeah, there's been a number of times I've looked at the Kindle and thought, how could you do like an interactive novel on the Kindle? But because there's no layer to even store the most basic variable, there's no programmatic.
That's really interesting though. So there's this tool called Twine. I don't know if anybody's come across Twine at all. It's a really simple little tool, and basically it lets you do like sort of storyboard flow charts of text interactions, and you can sort of make it more interesting with HTML and everything else. It's like, that's how simple it is, and you can do like these little just point and click through the options, yes, no, and it does story branches for you, and you can just put that on a website which you can look on your Kindle. And then all of a sudden it opens up this really weird sort of space for, I think, text-based games again. And I see a lot of these things get write-ups in traditional games media now, because it's getting more and more attention. Again, it comes back to the bedroom developer concept, where it's so simplified and the tool is free, and people are putting out these wonderful sort of narrative experiences that cross the boundary between choose your own adventure books and games. I think it's fascinating.
I think one of the things with that is that there's a lot of Twine games out there. Some are better than others.
Well, yeah.
But one of the things is you can have 100 Twine games, and 5 of them are really, really fantastic and original, and the others are all okay. With AAA, they have this attitude: everything has to be perfect and sell, and so everything has to be so polished that it is bland and boring. And these bedroom developers can be riskier, can be more inventive, can do such different things and approach such different subjects that AAA is never going to touch. The sort of Twine games that are out there, the story of, I was reading one the other day, playing one where it's just about a guy who lost a scarf, and it was slightly intertwined with a bit of personal backstory to this character. It was kind of interesting. You'd never get a AAA game about a guy who's lost a scarf. It just wouldn't happen. And we can have these fantastic inventive things with smaller, more approachable games that people can knock up in a few hours or a few weeks, and release freely. And that for me is where the interesting future of gaming is, with all these really experimental things where people are pushing the boundaries of theme, of content, and of mechanics as well. Some Twine games have very interesting mechanics. A lot of them are simple stories.
I just think it's such a nice thing to see. It's a free tool and such a sort of created, open-end platform to just give to people and go nuts with it.
Yeah, it's so easy. Anyone can do it.
It's if you have kids or whatever, it's a great thing to get them to sort of plot storylines and like essentially sort of build their own adventure books. I think it's such a lovely and flexible thing to be available for. Yeah, and like you said, there's a whole lot of dross out there that people have gone, I wonder what happens if I do this. But that's it's the same like most content creation, right?
I'd rather play like 10 half-hour Twine games than one 5-hour AAA game that doesn't excite me at all. Because I know with those Twine games I'll find something good.
AAA is stuck in a bit of a rut. I think they thought next-gen consoles were going to get them out of it. But as Julian said earlier, they keep falling back on what's safe. And when they do try and push the envelope, they suffer very much from severe budget and feature creep, and still trying to refine what's going on with stuff like DirectX 12. And working with the new architecture on PS4s and Xbox Ones has caused them no end of issue, and that's why we've seen a lot of big ticket titles get pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and people complain about it. But I feel like it's better that the studios are doing that than you get a situation like we did with Batman Arkham Knight on PC. I don't know if anybody experienced that.
Yes.
Basically, it
Still
was
hurts.
The most awful PC port I think I've ever seen a game have, and they're still trying to fix it.
In fact, for those of you who haven't followed it, one of the slight shooting themselves in the foot thing they did was that the PC version of Batman Arkham Knight was bundled with the new 900 series of GeForce cards, and it still didn't run very well on those cards that it was bundled with. I mean, that's the extent of the cock up.
It was so bad that they pulled the game from sale completely. Everywhere, in physical stores, on digital platforms. It was so bad, and they were so embarrassed.
Except they must have known. They must have known. Must have known.
I know that. So I think as so there's Kotaku, which do cover an awful lot of sort of geeky press essentially, and they seem to get an awful lot of insider reports, which fine, whatever, it's just a bit suspicious. Anyway, they had somebody say that yes, they knew it was in a poor state for months, and that nobody did anything about it. It was contracted out to an outside studio. Nobody was checking up on anything. So I think, when we go, you look at people like CD Projekt Red in Poland going, look guys, we're really sorry. We want to make sure that this is the best possible version of the game that we want to give you. By the way, by way of apology, we're going to give you all of this stuff that we were working on for free every week. And they've piled in free DLC ever since the game was launched, just to say sorry for, I think it was 6 months delay in the end. I don't know if anybody knows.
I wasn't really following
At The Witcher 3.
Yeah, no, I wasn't following The Witcher.
Okay, yeah. But they go, no, we've messed up. We're sorry. This is going to take some while. It's going to take a while for us to sort out, but we don't want to give you a game that doesn't work, doesn't look like how we want it to look, isn't the experience that we would want for ourselves. I think, the AAAs could learn a lot from people like CD Projekt Red, and it gives me great hope for the Cyberpunk game. That's basically the thing I'm holding on to right now.
Can we go to Can we go to questions? Because I'm aware that Julian has another panel at 2, and food is limited.
Yes.
So we'd like our panel to be able to eat before we move on. So yes, question at the back.
Yep. Hang on.
Oh,
Let me run.
run,
I'll
run, Lisa, run.
Run faster.
I'm like the wind. That's more of a shamble, but whatever.
Oh, you need to hold it, do you? What Darren was saying there about AAA games have almost been kind of blended into this kind of homogenous. It's either a first-person shooter, it's either a driving game, it's either a sports game. I can almost draw a parallel with the film industry, and you can almost see a film studio having a big meeting that runs extremely similar to a software studio saying, "So, what should we do now? Should we make another Spider-Man movie? Yeah, let's do that." And the game studio's doing pretty much exactly. Well, should we do another Assassin's Creed? Yeah, let's do that.
I think games industry is so much worse. Hollywood still produces interesting new titles. In gaming, it's remake after remake, sequel after sequel, same sort of game, just redone. And I think there's a certain degeneracy in gaming, that the community is so obsessed with what's come before.
But I think to be fair, I think one of the things that's different between, if you're looking at Hollywood and gaming, Hollywood's become quite a mature industry, and Hollywood knows. I say Hollywood as a thing, but big studios know that if they want to make a film that they're taking a bit more of a risk on, film studios know what size of project that is, so they know how many people and how much budget to commit to a project that's a risk. I think the problem with gaming in the big gaming studios, if you're going to commit 80 developers to working on a game for 2 years, you want to be absolutely certain that people want it at the end of 2 years. And I think that one of the challenges for the game industry is about working out what the size and scale of projects is that you can afford to take a risk on. And I think that's why, correct me if I'm wrong, Julian, because you are sort of in a more of a middle ground as a quite an established independent studio, but there doesn't seem to be much middle ground between really small teams working on experimental projects and big studios working on huge titles. There's a huge gulf.
There is a gulf, yeah. It's very noticeable. Like I said, hundreds of people working on Assassin's Creed titles, millions and millions of dollars of budget. There's not much in the middle ground, and it's there's also a dark side, I guess, to current trends, is that the business model that supports game development has almost been completely undermined in a way. So the big budget AAA titles rely on franchises and big marketing budgets, but the independent developer relies on small communities, low cost, and the middle isn't there. But the dark side is really that funding game development is more tricky, even though it's easier to produce games and easier to distribute them through online stores like Steam or the App Store. Actually reaching an audience that are prepared to pay money has actually now become incredibly difficult, and we see trends like the rise of the free-to-play business model, which many gamers don't like, but in practice this has been kind of a standard business model for mobile games, and even for in the PC gaming field with MOBAs and also World of Tanks, you name it, in FPS games. It's becoming much more of a common business model. So there is a financial squeeze which is incredible, and I'm not sure what the fallout is going to be, but it's looking, a lot of people that are involved in small-scale development are primarily doing it for the love of doing it, and the financial rewards are actually not that great for independent developers. They really aren't, and most of them struggle quite a lot, and it's tough. It's very tough.
Hi. I think there is one quite important aspect of gaming that quite often is being omitted, and that's modding of games. I think that it's very, nowadays, I think it's quite important for the studios to allow access of modding community to the game resources and allow them to mod the game, because the modding community is so creative, it's absolutely amazing, and they can put up so many great mods that will prolong the life of the game. I don't know, Skyrim, Morrowind even is such a great example of this. It's still out there, even despite being so old, such an old game. I think this aspect is not maybe brought up as often as it should be, I think.
One thing interesting thing about modding, you may have heard about Valve's recent experiment to sell mods, which was a disastrously withdrawn after less than a week, I think, and that shows what is happening with the business model is this kind of transformation. The people are trying to figure out how to make this sustainable for developers. So modders are primarily doing it, they're not doing it for money. They're making stuff as a hobby, and it's been given free. It's based on the game that exists. And this has become huge. It's great, but it's not being monetized. So publishers are trying to think, well, how can we make money from this? But in a way, it's very difficult. I mean, the modding scene is fantastic for creativity and community-driven development, but it's not good for the big publishers for sure.
Is it a lot of, say, for example, Chaos Reborn? Is it a lot of additional work for you to create the game in a way that supports mods, or is it simply a case of exposing the architecture of the game and kind of letting hackers go mad?
Yeah, Chaos Reborn is difficult. I mean, primarily we have an online game with our central server. It has more of a massively multiplayer orientation to it now, even though we have lots of offline content as well. I mean, one recent success, which is a Unity-based game, is called Cities Skylands, which has a very successful modding community almost from like day one. It's amazing. And to be honest, we haven't explored it with Chaos Reborn. We have user-generated content, and we have our own editors and stuff. So in a sense, we have providing tools for players to create content, for sure. And if you have a community of players who are creating content for your game, you can only benefit the game, I think. And I think that modding has a really interesting future in general.
if there are no pressing questions, we'll call that to draw it to a close there. Thank you very much, Julian, Darren, John, Lisa, and me, I suppose. Thank you all for coming and listening, and I hope that's been
Sorry for
illuminating.
cutting it short, everyone, but Julian is up at a panel in another 10 minutes, so we want to give him a bit of a break. But thank you very much for coming.
Thank you all.